Okay, how does it look?
It looks beautiful.
Great. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a second.
Welcome, everyone. We still have some folks trickling in, so we'll get started in about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. All right, I know we have a full session, so I want to get started and make sure you guys get all your time. So hello, everyone. My name is Sasha. I am the host today. I'm being assisted by our co-moderator, Ronnie, who is in the chat there, and Matt Kelly's helping out with tech and accessibility. Here we are looking at the Navigating the Edges, a design approach to Blue Core, and this presentation is being presented by members of Blue Core, a new collaboration between Cornell University, the University of California, Davis, the Library of Congress, University of Pennsylvania, and Stanford University. Representing Blue Core are Nancy Lorimer from Stanford University and Laura Daniels from Cornell University, Jeremy Nelson from Stanford University, technical lead for Blue Core, and Callie Mathos from Stanford University, product owner for Blue Core. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much for being here. This is Navigating the Edges, a design approach to Blue Core. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Welcome. If you have not heard of Blue Core yet, we are a collaboration to bring BibFrame cataloging to production. This photo is from the James Madison Memorial Building at the Library of Congress on one of the first trips we took to LC to discuss Blue Core. As Sasha provided in the overview, our membership at this time includes the University of California, Davis, Cornell University, Library of Congress, University of Pennsylvania, and Stanford University. The vision for Blue Core is shared here with a link to our website. The bold and underlined texts are my own emphasis. These, to me, are the central pillars of the project, and our efforts rely on the principles that inform the vision. These principles also align with what we are solving for. I shared the vision last year, so I won't go in great depth, but it is useful to revisit. In this presentation, I will be citing and quoting a paper by Rachel Ivy Clark titled Toward a Design Epistemology for Librarianship, which was published by the Library Quarterly in January of 2018. It has been in my personal toolbox for several years, and I return to it often, particularly when working on designing systems or workflows, and solutions to what she refers to as wicked problems that might be better solved through the lens of design disciplines rather than traditional science disciplines. Her dissertation on design epistemologies and American librarianship is titled It's Not Library Rocket Science, for some added context, though sometimes it feels like it is. My hope in these next few slides is to translate the work that has gone on in the Blue Core working groups during the prototyping phase and ground it in this research. So Clark calls back to early design scholars to look at how wicked problems are solved. While gaining complexity over time, design processes are iterative and align with our work in Blue Core. This process happens in the larger scope of an overall project and happens within each phase. In the prototype phase, we have practiced each of these steps in multiple iterations, which helps us iterate on the project in its entirety. So the analysis stage involves activities to understand the problem. This stage can happen throughout the stages, as understanding the problem is thought to be in many ways more important than creating the solution. And it changes as more information and knowledge is gained through experimenting, questioning, or framing and reframing. This means viewing a problem many different ways and from many different perspectives, including library patrons and library staff, oftentimes simultaneously. We might also set boundaries around where a problem stops and another problem begins. Clark writes that it was Brian Lawson who pointed out that it is a designer's ability to identify the problems, not solutions, that distinguishes good design from bad design. Otherwise, you might have to go back and redo your solution to accommodate the problems you missed earlier. The synthesis stage gathers information from the first phase and attempts to create a solution to the problem. This stage is far more complicated than does the solution work, and can contain many aspects of additional analysis and shifting, new, or ill-defined problems. However, it is an attempt to create something. The evaluation stage is a moment of reflection and assessment to see how well the solution fits the problem. In both design and librarianship, we are concerned with how well the solution will improve our capacity for service, improve the needs of our patrons, and improve overall services. And this service-oriented approach is what makes design strategies such a good fit for libraries. And then you rinse and repeat as needed. So this process may be repeated several times, and it could be repeated within a particular stage until the solution fits the problem adequately. Last year, we presented on Blue Core, and I've linked to that presentation and our slides to give you a sense for where we were last year and provide context for what we'll share today. Last year, we were planning for the prototype, and this year we've been working on building it. This is not a full-scale system. It is a right-sized, modest system that can help us answer questions about where to go next. Iteration, repertoire, reflection and action, use of representations, and abductive reasoning are all strategies Clark discusses and that we've used during this synthesis phase where we were trying to create a solution. And that's the Blue Core prototype. In the following slides, we'll provide an overview of these topics, and for the bolded items here, we'll speak in greater detail. So there are several design opportunities, so reframing our challenges or problems a little bit more positively, that we're investigating during the Blue Core prototyping phase, and these three stand out as areas where many smaller issues converge, and they are the easiest ones to speak about. The first one we'll focus on in like this kind of overview is BIBFRAME origins. So BIBFRAME can come from many different places. Now we're very lucky, right? We've made a lot of progress with BIBFRAME, and it can be created in many different ways. BibFrame generated from MARC conversion has its own unique qualities. BibFrame converted from MARC may look different depending on which version of the MARC conversion specifications were used in processing. It may also look different based on how the BibFrame ontology was implemented or has changed over time. BibFrame created in Sinopia with PCC templates follows a standard form, though it has also evolved over time. And while BibFrame created in Marva with LC profiles looks very similar, there are small differences. I've listed several topics on the right-hand side of this slide that have helped us navigate ingesting data from the Library of Congress BibFrame database and being able to open, edit, and save it in the Sinopia or Marva editor while thinking ahead to other future consuming applications down the line. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide as Nancy Lorimer, my supervisor, will speak in greater detail about designing metadata workflows, but to help orient you for what she will share, consider moving from a legacy ILS to a more modular LSP and how it enables us to shift cataloging work for works and instances outside of the local system and how that requires rethinking the entire cataloging data flow. Opportunity 3 centers around description sets. So Blue Core has ingested concise bounded descriptions, or CBD, to build a foundation of data from the Library of Congress BibFrame database. Concise bounded descriptions act like a package of data. They are describing a subgraph of an overall RDF graph and include statements about the resources it contains. These subgraphs have proven useful for the interchange of BibFrame data between data pools. And one current investigation is how we can ingest RDF from the BFDB, receive regular updates from LC, while also adding Blue Core specific statements that are not overwritten upon update. This raises a lot of interesting questions about what statements could be added, how long of a description is too long, and technically how to solve for updating half of a linked data description set instead of an entire set, given that the resources are given a Blue Core URI upon ingest with a BF derived from property linking to its derived URI. And if you're interested about this, in the overall slide of the 3 opportunities, there are links to a talk Philip Skur from Stanford University gave, and another paper by Rachel Ivy Clark about conceptualizing bibliographic data that were really helpful for me in thinking about how things change with linked data. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Daniels from Cornell to speak about Blue Core and open data.
Thanks, Kelly. So I believe that openness is foundational to everything we do in libraries. And by open in this context, what I'm specifically thinking about is that open data is freely available for use and reuse. I'm also thinking that it is transparent about who created it, where it was created, what it was derived from, and that it's created and maintained collaboratively according to shared standards and practices. So our current shared metadata models often rely on institutions making and storing copies of bibliographic and authority data and/or rely heavily on third-party organizations such as vendors to access descriptions. Some critiques of BibFrame have included that in order to affect a transition to linked data in libraries, a central triple store would have to be designed, created, and maintained, since one of the fundamental tenets of the linked data ethos is not to copy data locally, but to store it centrally. So enter Blue Core. I would say that a single data store to rule them all is never going to exist, but an open, collaboratively created and maintained data store does effectively counter this particular concern. Next slide, please. I have been much more involved in the Folio community than I have in the LD4, and I hope that my time there has helped inform my approach to participating in Blue Core. So I wanted to share some of the lessons that I've learned with Folio. And one of those is really starting with the need, and that comes back to identifying what is the problem, what's the wicked problem we're trying to solve. And it particularly for me includes being willing to be very basic, and then to repeat. I should perhaps say rinse, repeat. And the example that I think of this in the Folio context is when we were trying to work on a way to handle bound widths. And we had multiple meetings with developers, and we shared several different libraries, shared examples from our databases of, okay, this is this bound width, this is what it looks like, these are the things in it. I felt like we had explained it 200 times. And then one of the developers, after like an hour of this, said, it sounds like you want to take a bunch of unrelated things and bind them together and like represent that in your catalog. And we're like, yes. This is what we've been saying for 2 hours. It took us 2 hours to actually convince them that yes, this crazy thing that they thought no one would ever want to do was exactly what we were asking for. And we actually now have, I think, a pretty good solution available in Folio for bound widths. Then I also think a lot about our assumptions and how failure to identify our assumptions can lead us astray. And so once again, this goes back to being very, very explicit about very basic things. And this is less of a success story than the bound widths, but I want to tell the story of the effective call number in Folio, which is basically a way for the item record to inherit a property from a holdings record, which seems very straightforward. So if there is a call number specified on an item record, that is your effective call number. If there's no call number specified, then the item gets it from the holdings record. And we described this and we got something that works that way. But because of the way it was implemented, and this is because we didn't iterate enough and we didn't do that rinsing and repeating, we failed to articulate the fact that we wanted this property to exist whether there was an item record or not. And so the way that it was implemented, it only works if there's an item. And so this is one of those lessons that I constantly remind myself of, that I need to identify my own assumptions and I need to lay those bare. And I need to, first of all, validate that my assumptions are relevant, and then make sure I understand what everybody else's assumptions are, and then go from there. So I hope that is helping us with the work we are doing. And now I believe I'm passing over to Nancy.
Hi, well, with that great intro to, I am Nancy Lorimer, Associate Head of Metadata Services. Yes, I am Callie's supervisor, but I don't supervise her that much. On the other hand, as Laura was saying, we have to talk about very, very basic structures about, and make sure that we actually know what everyone is talking about and everyone understands that they are talking about the same thing. It is amazing how long you can go on saying one word and find out a month later that everybody had a different meaning for that same word. But for me, as a former cataloger and head of catalogers, Blue Core is all about metadata, open access to that metadata, and sharing rather than copying resource descriptions. And by this last, I mean, as Laura said earlier, rather than copy a Blue Core description into our local library system, as we currently have to do with MARC, we will use the Blue Core store, which I'll call the Blue Store afterwards, so don't trip over my tongue, as the source of truth, mapping as necessary to the local system for very local functions and at times display. And because of this, we need to really clearly understand the workflows catalogers use and how they work in the linked data environment. So the metadata workflows group has started analyzing the workflows to start of an individual cataloger cataloging individual items and interpreting them for the Blue Core environment using our two editors, Sinopia and Marva. So far, more with Sinopia because that's just the one we have more active use of at the moment. Most of these, if you are a cataloger, most of these workflows will look patently familiar. They don't change overly much in some ways, but there are differences. And so we are categorizing them rather than calling things like original cataloging or copy cataloging about the actions that the actual cataloger is doing. So first we have enhance metadata. We add more metadata to an existing description. We correct a metadata in an existing description. We add links to related descriptions. This is what you might call an equivalent to copy cataloging in MARC, though we will see there are a few important differences, and we are trying to get out of the idea of copy, seeing we are not copying the record. This is the only workflow currently supported in the Blue Core prototype, so this is the first one we will be seeing. We will also create metadata, meaning creating new descriptions or portions of descriptions without any pre-existing data, or perhaps from some stub data from outside resources. Generally, this is the equivalent to original cataloging in MARC, again, with a few added wrinkles. And our third basic workflow is derive, in which we create new descriptions or portions of descriptions by duplicating metadata from any existing description and repurposing it through editing as a new description with a new URI. This is generally known as derived original cataloging in the MARC environment. And in my last little block there, we are also looking at the connection between the Blue Core store and our library service providers, or ILSs. We still will have them for holdings data and local data and acquisitions data and all that stuff. So we do have to link to them. And so for that, let's work at the workflows. To start, I will say we are only looking at metadata originating in Blue Core not a local ILS or LSP or outside source. And not that we won't use them, but this is what we're starting to look at first. So let's start with a workflow for Enhance. This is a very obvious workflow. A cataloger searches for existing descriptions using the editor of their choice, Marva or Sinopia, in the Blue store. And lo and behold, they find a work and instance that are equivalent to their own, that somebody else already owns this item and therefore cataloged it. If they wish, and that's why this is marked as optional, that you can open up the description in the editor, add anything, modifications they want to add, and save that in Blue Core. It is then saved. They then save it in Blue Core and they link the bundled description to their ILS in whichever way they do it. In the case of Folio, which is my local system as well as Laura's, this means mapping the Blue Core metadata to that of the inventory instance JSON record that works as an operational record, linking the descriptive metadata, the holdings, the orders, etc., and may also provide basic display in a discovery layer in some cases. I'll just say one wrinkle here is that since Blue Core is the metadata of truth, any enhancements done to the Blue Core description need to be communicated to any library that holds that item, not only to your own library. In this way is a way to keep the metadata in sync. And also, I will say from the cataloger end of things, enhancing cataloging shows again the necessity of providing a very strong community norms for what kind of enhancements we do. And with built-in permissions and versioning, strong permissions and strong versioning to support those norms. Next slide, please. The create workflow starts very much the same, searching for existing descriptions, but in this case, nothing found. In that case, the cataloger creates the BIBFRAME Work and Instance in the editor and loads them into Blue Core. The bundled description, again, is saved in Blue Core and links to the cataloger's ILS. This is really the very simplest workflow on first glance, since it really only affects the actual cataloger and their particular ILS to start. Then next slide. Finally, we have derived. In the case described in this particular diagram, and there's very many ways to do derive, the cataloger finds a equivalent work, BIBFRAME work in Blue Core, but the attached instance is for a different instance. The most common example perhaps may be a corrected edition of that work or an electronic version instead of a print. The same content in a different format. In this case, the cataloger might open the variant instance description in the Blue Core editor and then duplicate that instance as the basis for creation of their own new instance. In this way, they don't have to recopy all the metadata. They can just duplicate it and then make what changes are necessary for their new instance. So again, this new instance and its work would be linked to the cataloger's ILS. The original instance would not, because presumably if the cataloger did not own that instance in the first place. On the other hand, the interesting part about this is when they save the work, they might, when they create this new instance, they may possibly do some enhancing of that work that remains the same. And while that new instance and work goes to their catalog, what happens with the modified work? And we're wondering whether that modified work also has to go to other people's catalogs or ILSs without any new instance involved in order to keep their ILSs in sync. So this is actually a fairly complicated thing to do, and it's actually kind of complicated thing to say, and I hope that was clear. So, so this slide and all the other slides above address linking to the ILS here, as I was just saying. But what might happen there is already a base record. But we don't. What happens if there is already a base record in that ILS? I will only address workflows for Folio here since ALMA, which is our other ILS, is somewhat different. In Folio, order records can be attached to, as we mentioned before, the inventory instance, confusing kind of name, which is a JSON record. In MARC cataloging, a cataloger might take the equivalent acquisition record and build on it to create a fully cataloged record. This would be also a nice idea with linked data. The less duplicative typing, of course, the better. And we do not want to repeat data. So the dream for us is actually to take a Blue Core instance, open it up in our editor, and create a new work instance pair that complete cataloging and refresh the instance. So these are some of the workflows we started looking at. There are, of course, dozens of workflows for catalogers, but these are the three basic ones and a little additional thought that we have come up with for people, for the developers to work with. And I guess I pass it on to who's next, which I do not know.
Thank you so much, Nancy and
Well,
Laura.
I think we have our update, don't we?
Yeah, I'm going to
Jeremy.
hand it over to Jeremy.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I will share my screen. So we currently are towards the end of our development of the prototype stage, and it's been a good experience. Multiple institutions have participated in the prototype development. Developers from Stanford and Cornell, along with support from UC Davis, have all contributed to where we're currently at. In the prototype, we've deployed a development environment, and it's right now on my screen. So here, it's really Blue Core is a lot of back-end services. And so there's not a lot to see in terms of the UI, but I'll try my best to be able to just to show some various aspects of Blue Core and what it looks like. As Callie and Nancy and Laura have mentioned, primarily catalogers will be interacting with Blue Core either through Sinopia or Marva, linked data editors. So those are going to be their primary user interface interactions with Blue Core. However, we do have requirements that go beyond those editors for such things as batch updates or batch ingestion. Also, since this was really a brand new project, and around the same time as Blue Core was coming together, you may have heard of ChatGPT and generative AI. So we wanted to be conscientious and really sort of think about the technology choices that we made that would allow us to start leveraging some of the generative AI capabilities that have sort of opened up some, I think, to me, really exciting opportunities on how we can use AI to enhance and improve cataloger workflows. And by being mindful of those, it really informed our design decisions as we've built out the current Blue Core stack. Now, here you can kind of see the front end. We have some major components. We have the actual API that allows clients and primarily will be Sinopia and Marva to interact with the Blue Core database. And one thing I want to show real quick is this might be helpful to provide a little bit of context.
And just to note, you have 3 minutes left in the presentation.
Okay, well, real quick. Okay. So I won't show that then. So we have, in terms of our stack, we try to use all open source software as well as using projects that are also used in other library systems. So for our authentication and authorization, we're using Keycloak, which Folio's Eureka upgrade will use. We're using Apache Airflow to manage batch ingest and also other uh, more workflow based tasks that need to get done. And also, I want to show real quickly, we've been working on a update to Sinopia to actually use Blue Core. And if you use Sinopia before and its editor, this may look similar, but one of the things we've done is we've changed the branding. We've changed the color scheme. And one big thing we've done is integrated with Keycloak instead of using the AWS authentication for our technology that we used before. So if I log in here, I'm just using a login. It's very similar to what you'd expect in Sinopia or Sinopia Classic, but now we're using Keycloak instead of AWS. As we're developing or working on supporting search through the API in the database, and that'll be implemented within the next month and a half. Initially during the prototype phase, we want to be able to do basic searches, bring up a resource, any found resources in Blue Core, and be able to edit those. And so I think we're on track to be able to do that. I think that's probably close to my time. So I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Jeremy. So we just have one last slide. After we're finished with the prototyping phase, we will enter a period of evaluation. So calling back to that, let me just share my screen real fast. Calling back to those design phases. So we will be assessing the prototype and thinking about how we want to move forward with the MVP, and look forward to sharing that work with the community as we get ready for 2026. So that will be another kind of cycle of design, building, and assessing our work. So thanks, everyone. And please let us know what you think. And if you have questions, we're available on Slack, and I'll check the chat as soon as we're done. Thank you so much.